On a forgotten fringe of the Andromeda arm where stars flickered like dying embers, a lone vessel drifted through the silent dark, its hull scarred by battle, its crew exhausted from weeks of running. The ship named the Dusk Runner carried the last, remnants of a human strike force that had ventured too far beyond known space. They had engaged an unknown enemy near the Helix Nebula and barely escaped with their lives. Now they floated in a dead zone where sensors barely worked and comms crackled, with ghost signals. Inside the ship, the air smelled of burnt wiring and stale coffee. Lila sat alone in the comms bay, her fingers resting lightly on the console. Her eyes half closed. She was not sleeping but listening. The others thought she was just tired. But Lila heard something no one else did. A whisper in the static, soft and strange like wind through crystal chimes. It had started 3 days ago, right after the last battle, and it would not stop. Lila was not like the others. She had always been quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed when someone changed their tone or when a machine hummed a fraction too high. She had joined the fleet not for glory, but because she felt something pulling her out here into the black, as if space itself had been calling her name in a language only she could almost understand. Captain Dunn entered the bay, his boots heavy on the metal floor. He was a broad man with a face carved by stress and sunless years in deep space. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, still hearing things. Lilash did not look up, just nodded. "It's not nothing," sir, he sighed, rubbing his temple. "We lost 12 good people out there, Lila. We can chase ghosts, but this isn't a ghost," she said, finally turning to face him, her eyes clear and steady. "It has a pattern, a rhythm like it wants to be found." Dunn studied her for a long moment, then glanced at the sensor readout on the wall. A faint anomaly blinked near the edge of their range, a derelict station orbiting a dead moon long abandoned by any known civilization. "All right," he said slowly. "We check it out. But if it's a trap, we run no heroics. Thank you, sir." The Dusk Runner changed course, its engines groaning softly as it turned toward the signal. The closer they got, the stronger the whisper became. Lila could almost make out words, not in any human tongue, but in something older, smoother, like water over stone. When they reached the station, it loomed against the black, a skeletal ring of metal and glass, half melted by some ancient fire. It spun slowly, as if dreaming. The moon below was gray and lifeless, cratered and cold. No atmosphere, no heat, just silence. Scans show no power, no life signs. "No movement," said Tanner, the young sensor tech. His voice tight. "With nerves, but the signal is coming from inside," Lila insisted. Dunn ordered a team, suited up, 2 Marines, Lila and himself. They crossed the void in a shuttle. The silence outside was total. No wind, no sound, just the soft hiss of their own breath inside, their helmets. They docked at an airlock that should not have worked, but did. The door slid open with a sigh of stale air inside. The station was dark, but not empty. The walls were lined with strange glyphs, glowing faintly blue, and the floor was smooth, like polished bone. Lila led the way, her boots clicking softly. She followed the sound. It grew clearer with every step, not just in her ears, but in her chest, like a second heartbeat. Then they found it, a chamber at the heart of the station, circular, with a domed ceiling made of crystal that shimmered even in the dim light. In the center stood a pod, tall and slender, cracked open from the inside, and inside the pod stood a woman. She was tall, with skin like pale silver and long hair that seemed to catch the light even though there was none. Her ears tapered to delicate points and her eyes glowed faintly. Amber, she wore a suit of woven fibers that shimmered like liquid starlight. Everyone froze. The Marines raised their rifles, but Lila stepped forward slowly, hands open. "She is not armed," Lila said. The woman turned her head slowly, as if waking from a long sleep. Her gaze fell on Lila, and something passed between them. A flicker of recognition, then from the shadows behind the pod, something uncurled. It was no bigger than a large dog, but its presence filled the room. It moved like smoke given form, its body covered in scales that shifted color with every breath. Deep violet, then silver, then black. Its eyes were wide and intelligent and fixed on Lila. "Dragon," whispered Dunn. The woman spoke, then her voice melodic and layered like many voices speaking at once. "She does not understand you," Lila said, surprising herself. But she did. She understood every word the woman had not spoken in sound, but in feeling an image in memory. Her name is Alara, Lila said softly. And this is Nyx, how do you know that? Alara took a step forward, her bare feet silent on the floor. She raised a hand not in threat, but in offering. Lila reached out and their fingers almost touched when alarms blared through the comm. Captain, we've got incoming ships, multiple contacts fast and silent. Dunn cursed and turned to the Marines. Get back to the shuttle now. But Lila did not move. They're coming for her, she said. Who the ones who destroyed her home? The ones who hunt her kind, how do you know? Because I heard them in the static. Alara looked at Lila, then at the ceiling, as if she could see through the metal and stone to the stars beyond her expression, changed from calm to sharp focus. They are here. Outside the station, 3 ships dropped out of warp, black and jagged like shards of obsidian. They made no sound. No engine flare, just appeared as if space itself had torn open to let them through. Crother Dunn breathed. Lila had never heard the name, but the dread in his voice told her everything. Alara turned to Nyx and placed a hand on the dragon's head. The creature lowered itself, then, in a blur of motion, leaped onto her shoulder, its claws gentle on her skin. We have to go, Lila said. Alara nodded but did not move toward the door. Instead, she looked at Lila and spoke again. Not in words, but in a single image. A memory of a child with human eyes and Silthari hands. Lila staggered as if struck. What was that? You are more than you know, Alara said in perfect English, her voice now clear and human. How your blood remembers. Before Lila could respond, the station shook a blast, hit the outer ring. Metal screamed and lights flickered. Move, shouted. Done, they ran through the twisting corridors, Nyx leaping ahead, scouting the path. Alara moved with impossible grace. Silent and swift, Lila struggled to keep up her heart, pounding not just from fear but from the strange pull in her chest, like something inside her was waking up. They reached the shuttle just as another blast rocked the station. The Marines were already inside, engines running. Get in, Dunn yelled. Alara paused at the ramp. She looked back toward the heart of the station, then at Lila. They took everything she said. But not this. She held out her hand. Come with me. Lila hesitated only a second, then took it. The shuttle launched just as the station collapsed behind them. The Crother ships turned but did not follow, as if they knew something. The humans did not. Inside the shuttle, Alara sat quietly. Nyx curled at her feet, his eyes half closed but alert. Who are you? Lila asked. Alara looked at her with those glowing amber eyes. I'm the last of the Silthari, and you, Lila, are the first of something new. Lila said nothing. She just stared out the viewport at the stars. The whisper in her mind was gone, replaced by something deeper, quieter. A silence that waited, and for the first time in her life she did not feel alone. Back aboard the Dusk Runner, tension hung thick in the air. The crew moved quietly, eyes darting toward the guest quarters where Alara and Nyx had been given space to rest. No one knew what to make of them. Some whispered that they were weapons, others that they were ghosts or worse, curses wrapped in beauty. Lila sat alone in the mess hall, nursing a cup of cold synth tea, her mind racing. She kept replaying the moment Alara had spoken in perfect English, how she had known her name without being told in that image, the child with human eyes and Silthari hands. It clung to her like a second skin. Captain Dunn entered and sat across from her. He looked older than he had that morning, lines deeper around his eyes. Okay? She nodded, but did not speak. You've been quiet even for you. She looked up at him. Then what if I'm not just human? He leaned back as if bracing himself. What do you mean? Alara said. My blood remembers. She said it, like it was fact, not guess. Dunn rubbed his jaw. We scanned her when she came aboard. No known DNA matches, no implants, no tech, just biology, but not our. And Nixie shook his head. Not an animal, not a machine. Something else entirely. Lila stared into her cup. They're running from something bigger than us. Before Dunn could answer, the ship shuddered. A low groan ran through the hull. Lights flickered, then stabilized. Report came over the comm sensors, just lit up. Captain. Multiple contacts emerging from subspace, same signature as before. Crotherias, sir, and they're not stopping. Dunn stood quickly. Battle stations. Alarms blared through the ship. Red lights pulsed. Lila followed Dunn to the bridge. The crew moved fast, strapping in checking systems. The view screen showed 3 black ships hanging in the void, silent and still. They're not hailing, not broadcasting, nothing, just watching, Lila said. Why? Because they know she is here. As if on cue, Ilara appeared at the bridge doorway, Nyx at her heels. The crew tensed, but she ignored them, her eyes fixed on the screen. They have come for the resonance, she said. The what? The song inside me, the one your kind cannot hear, but she looked at Lila. Lila felt it, then a low hum beneath the ship, a vibration in her bones. What do we do? Dunn asked. Run, Ilara said simply. We can't outrun them, not with their tech. Then I will sing. No one moved for a long moment. Sing. Yes, Lila understood before anyone else did. She means to fight with sound, Ilara nodded. Sound is not just noise, it is shape, it is force, it is memory. The Crother fear it, because they have none of their own. Dunn looked at Lila. You trust her? I don't know. But I believe her. That will have to do. Lara walked to the center of the bridge and closed her eyes. Nyx circled her. Once then lay down, his head on his paws, his scales dimming too. Near black, she began to hum. It started soft, barely audible, but the ship responded. Lights dimmed, consoles flickered. The air grew heavy. Then she opened her mouth and sang. It was not a song anyone had ever heard before. It had no words, only tones that bent and twisted like living things. The sound filled the bridge, not loud but deep, as if it came from the core of the planet they had never seen. Outside, the Crother ships twitched. One of them jerked sideways as if struck by an invisible hand. What is happening, Tanner? The sensor tech whispered. Their hulls are vibrating at a frequency that should tear them apart, but they're holding. Not for long, Lila said. Ilara's voice rose higher, clearer. The notes sharp as glass. The nearest Crother ship cracked. Down the middle, light flared from within. Then it exploded, not with fire, but with silence. A perfect void where sound ceased to exist. The other 2 ships recoiled, pulling back into subspace in seconds. The bridge was quiet. Ilara collapsed. Lila caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was cold. Her breath shallow. Nyx whined and pressed close. His body warm against her. Get medbay ready, Dunn ordered. They carried her to the infirmary. The ship doctor, a gruff woman named Rios, ran scans but found nothing wrong physically. Her energy is drained, Rios said, like a battery pushed too far. How long, you don't know. Lila stayed by her side through the night. Nyx refused to leave. Either he lay curled at the foot of the bed, his eyes never leaving Ilarabi. Morning, she stirred. You saved us, Lila said. No, she whispered. You listened. That is how it works. The song needs ears that understand. Why me? Because you carry the echo. The echo of my people, of the ones who came before, of the ones who tried to warn your kind long ago. Lila sat back, so I'm part Siltheran, at part something else. You are a bridge, a meeting place. That made less sense, not more, but Lila did not argue. What happens now? The Crother will not stop, they never do. Then we stop? The Ilara looked at her. With tired eyes. It is not that simple. It has to be done. Entered, then his expression grim. We picked up a distress call from the outer rim. A mining colony called Virel. They were human until last month. Now they're silent. Ilara sat up slowly. The Crother have been there. How do you know? I can feel the silence they left behind. Lila stood. We have to go. Dunn hesitated. It's a trap, probably. But if they took people, we have to try. He looked at Ilara. Can you fight again? Not yet. But Lila can learn. Lila blinked. Miu. Heard the song? You felt it? You can be taught. Dunn sighed. All right, we go, but we go smart. They prepared the ship quietly, loading extra power cells, reinforcing the shields. Lila spent hours with Ilara in the cargo bay, a quiet space far from prying ears. Ilara said. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor. Nyx lay beside her, his head in her lap. Close your eyes. She didn't listen. Not with your ears, with your blood. Lila tried. It felt foolish at first. Then she felt it. A faint pulse, like a second heartbeat. That is the resonance, she said. What do I do with it? Shape it? How? With memory, with feeling, with truth. Ilara began to hum again. Soft and slow this time. Lila did not just hear it. She felt it move through her like water finding its path. Try, she said. Lila took a breath and made a sound low and shaky. Ilara smiled. Good now again, but think of something real, something that matters. Lila thought of her mother who had died when she was 6. She remembered the smell of her hair, the sound of her laugh, the way she used to sing while cooking. She sang again. This time the note held steady, the air around her shimmered faintly. Nix lifted his head and made a soft chime-like sound. "You did it," Alara said. It felt like nothing. It was everything. The first note is always the hardest. They practiced for hours until Lila's throat ached and her head spun. But each time the sound grew stronger, clearer. Later that night, Lila dreamed. She stood on a world of silver trees and violet skies. A city of crystal towers rose in the distance, and in the center a great tree pulsed with light. People moved through the streets, tall and graceful, with eyes like stars. They sang as they walked, their voices weaving together into a single living song. Then the sky turned black. Ships fell like stones, burning the city. The song broke into screams. A woman ran toward her holding a child. The woman's face was blurred, but her voice was clear. "Take her, hide. Her let her growth." A woman pressed the child into Lila's arms. But when Lila looked down, the child was herself. She woke gasping. Alara stood in the doorway. "You saw it." "Yes, that was my home. That was the day they came for us." "Why show me?" "Because you were there in another life, or another thread of time. You were chosen then. And you are chosen now." Lila rubbed her face. "I don't want to be chosen. I just want to help. That is enough." The next morning, the dusk runner jumped to Virel. The colony was dark. No lights, no signals, no movement. They landed near the main dome, suits sealed, weapons ready. Inside, the dome was empty. Tables still set, food half-eaten, tools lying where they were dropped, but no people. No bodies. Then Lila heard it, a hum low and wrong, like a machine trying to mimic a heartbeat. "Follow me," she said. They moved through the corridors until they reached the central chamber. In the middle of the room floated a sphere, black and smooth, pulsing with that same wrong hum. Alara went pale. The hollow core. "What is it?" "A machine that eats songs. It takes the resonance from living minds and turns it into power. They took the colonists years to feed it." Lila felt sick. "Can we stop it?" "Not yet, it is too strong, but we can delay it." "How?" "Be leaving a counter song." Alara stepped forward and placed her hand on the sphere. She closed her eyes and began to sing softly, the notes wrapped around the hum, fighting it, pushing back. The sphere flickered. Lila joined her voice, shaky at first, then stronger. Nix stood guard, his body tense, his eyes glowing. The hum weakened. Then alarms blared. "Crother ships, they have to finish." Dunn shouted over the comms. Alara sang harder. Blood trickled from her nose. Lila pushed through the pain in her throat, her voice rising to meet Alara's. The sphere cracked. Light burst from within, then went dark. They did it. Run. They sprinted. Back to the ship. Crother troops poured into the dome. Black armored figures with no faces. The dusk runner lifted off just as the first shots hit back in space. They watched as the colony dome collapsed in on itself. Alara slept for 2 days. When she woke, she looked at Lila and said, "You are ready for what?" For the war. Lila did not argue. She knew it was true. The Crother would keep coming, and this time they would be ready to sing back. The third day began with fire, not real fire, but the kind that burned in the Mindale. Woke to the scent of burning leaves. Though nothing around him was lit, the air shimmered with heat that came and went like breath. He sat up slowly, his body stiff. From sleeping on stone, Ember lay nearby, his scales duller than usual, his breathing slow and deep. Lila was already gone. He stood and stepped out of the cave. The forest was different. The trees stood farther apart, their branches bare, though it was not winter. The ground was covered in ash that crunched underfoot and did not blow away in the wind. The sky overhead was the color of rust, and the twin suns hung low as if exhausted. A path of black stones led away from the cave, each one marked with a symbol he could not read but somehow understood: fear, regret, pride, shame. He followed it. The air grew heavier with every step, not just with heat but with memory. Suddenly he was not in the forest anymore. He stood on a crowded spaceport, laughing. As he sold fake data chips to a group of tourists, his words smooth, his smile wide. He remembered how good it felt to fool them, how clever he thought he was. Then the scene shifted. He was younger, standing over a broken drone he had sabotaged so his friend would fail a test just so he could win a bet. He remembered the look on his friend's face, the hurt, the confusion, and how he had laughed it off as a joke. Another shift who was on the silver fin, broadcasting his mockery into the void, grinning, like a fool not caring who might hear, not thinking about the weight of his words. The visions came faster now, one after another, each showing a moment when he had used humor to hurt, to hide, to lie. He fell to his knees, gaspings. Stop, he wanted to say, but no sound came. Then a voice, not Lila's, not Ember's, but his own, echoed in his skull. Was it ever just a joke? He had no answer. The visions faded, and he was back in the forest. The ash still underfoot, the black stones leading onward. He stood shakily and kept walking. After a long while he reached a clearing where Lila waited beside a stone altar carved with spirals that seemed to move when not looked at directly. You faced the mirror of deeds, she said. He nodded, unable to speak. No, you faced the trial of thorns. She gestured to the far side of the clearing where a wall of thorned vines rose higher than the trees. The thorns were long and black, each one glistening with something wet. To pass you must walk through it, she said, but it will tear me apart if you resist. He stared at the wall, heart pounding. What do you mean? The thorns do not cut flesh. They cut lies. If you carry none, they will not harm you. He swallowed. I have lies. Everyone does, she said. The question is whether you are ready to let them go. He took a breath and stepped forward. The first thorn brushed his arm. Pain shot through him. Not physical, but deep, like a memory being ripped out. He gasped as an image flashed, a time he had lied to his mother about where he was going. A small lie, but one that kept her worried for days. The thorn left no mark, but he felt lighter. He took another step. Another thorn grazed his chest this time. The pain sharper, a memory of cheating on a certification exam, stealing someone else's work, and calling it his own shame burned through him. He kept going. Each step brought a new memory, a new lie, a new piece of himself he had hidden even from himself. The thorns pulled them out one by one, not with cruelty but with purpose, like a surgeon, removing poison. By the time he reached the center of the wall, he was weeping, not from pain but from clarity. He saw how much of his life had been built on pretending, on making others laugh so they would not see the emptiness behind his smile. The final thorn touched his forehead, and in that moment he remembered the signal, not just the sound but what it meant. It was not a distress call, it was a vow, a promise made by Lila's people to guard the silence between stars, to protect the balance of worlds from those who would mock what they did not understand, and he had laughed at it. He fell to his knees in the center of the thorn wall, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. The thorns parted. Lila stood on the other side. Her expression, unreadable. You have passed the trial of thorns, she said. He looked up at her, eyes red but clear. What now? Now you learn what it means to stand for something. They walked beyond the wall into a valley where the ground was soft and warm like living skin. The air smelled of rain and old stone. In the distance rose a spire of black rock veined with gold light. That is the heart spire, she said, where the final choice will be made. But before they could reach it, the sky changed. The rust-colored clouds split, apart not by wind but by force. Deep roar echoed not from the planet but from above. Dale looked up and his blood ran cold. Ships. Imperial warships, 3 of them sleek and brutal, their hulls scarred from 100 battles. They descended fast, their weapons humming to life. How did they find us, he asked. Your broadcast, she said. They traced the anomaly. Your voice led them here like a beacon. He felt sick. I didn't mean. Intent does not erase consequence. She repeated the words from their first meeting. Lead ship opened a channel. Its voice cold and mechanical, unidentified life forms. Surrender the human and the bioanomaly or be eradicated, bioanomaly. Dale whispered, looking at Lila. They see her as a weapon. They see everything as a weapon. The ships, fired not at them but at the ground around them, testing. Shaking the earth with controlled blasts. Lila did not flinch. Ember rose to his feet, his scales flashing copper, his eyes blazing. Dale looked from the ships to Lila to the heart spire. What do we defend, she said. But I have nothing. You have your choice. She turned and ran toward the heart spire, Ember at her side. Dale hesitated only a second before following. The ships fired again, this time closer. The ground exploded behind him, throwing him forward. He rolled and scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering. He was not a soldier. He had no weapons, no training. But he had made a choice. He ran. They reached the base of the heart spire just as the first Imperial drop pod slammed into the valley. Its hatch hissing open to reveal armored soldiers with pulse rifles. Leela raised her hands and sang not a song of words but of tone pure and sharp. The air around her rippled. The ground trembled, and from the soil rose figures tall and slender there, skin like bark. Their eyes glowing gold, they carried no weapons, but their hands crackled with energy. The veiled kin. The Imperial soldiers opened fire. The pulses struck the kin and vanished, absorbed like rain into dry earth. Then the kin moved, fast, silent, deadly. They did not kill. They disabled rifles. Melted armor joints locked with vines that sprouted from nowhere. Ember leapt into the fray. His breath, now a stream of blue flame that turned metal to Slagdale, stood at the base of the spire, unsure what. Then he saw it, a fallen Imperial rifle half buried in ash. He picked it up. It was heavy, unfamiliar. But he had seen enough battles on feeds to know the basics. She aimed not at the soldiers, but at the pod's power core. Fired. The explosion was small, but enough to disable the pod systems. Lila glanced at him. A flicker of surprise in her eyes. Good, she said. More pods came. More soldiers. The battle spread across the valley, fire and vine clashing in a storm of chaos. Dale fought not with skill, but with desperation, ducking behind rocks, using the terrain, using everything he had learned in the past days about watching. Listening, moving. He was not a hero, but he was no longer a fool. And that was enough. The Dusk Runner emerged from the veiled nebula. Not alone behind it flew a ragged fleet of rebel ships patched together from salvaged hulls and stolen tech, humans and aliens side by side, all that remained of those who had resisted the Crothar. The fleet was small, but their will was sharp. Leela stood on the bridge, her hands resting on the console. She no longer flinched at the Core's call. It had become a part of her, like a second breath. Ilara stood beside her, Nyx at their feet. His body, still weak but his eyes bright with purpose. Captain Dunn gave the order: all ships form wedge pattern, target the outer spires, do not engage the core directly. Not yet. Lila knew why they could not attack the heart. Not until she was ready. The Crothar fortress hung in space, a monstrous structure built inside the swirling ring of a collapsed black hole. Its spires twisted like claws, its surface pulsing with the same dark rhythm as the hollow Koreas. The fleet approached. Silence fell, no comms, no warnings, just the hum of engines and the beat of Lila's heart. Then the fortress opened, ships poured out, black and silent, hundreds of them. Battle began, lasers cut through the void. Explosions bloomed like dying flowers. The rebel fleet fought with everything they had, but the Crothar were endless. Layla watched the chaos, but her mind was elsewhere. She felt the core inside the fortress, waiting. We have to go in, she said. Dunn nodded. Shuttle bay is ready. Ilara touched Layla's arm. You sure? No, but it does not matter. They boarded the shuttle, Nyx leaping in last, his claws clicking softly on the floor. The ship launched into the storm, weaving through fire and debris as they neared the fortress. Time began to bend. The stars outside stretched. Then snapped. The shuttle groaned as if caught in a giant hand. Inside, Lila gasped. Visions flooded her, not dreams this time, but memories of her real mother, the Silthari woman who had held her as a baby and whispered a song into her ear. A song that was not just lullaby, but map, a key, a promise. You will find your way back. The shuttle docked on a spire near the core's chamber. The air outside was thick with static. Every step felt heavy, as if walking through water. They moved quickly through twisting corridors, the walls alive with shifting glyphs that pulsed in time with the core. Then they reached the inner gate. It was sealed. Lila placed her hand on the surface and sang a single note, soft and clear. The gate opened. Inside the chamber was vast, a cavern of black crystal with the hollow core floating at its center. A sphere of shifting darkness ringed with veins of red light, and standing before it, a figure tall and skeletal wrapped in robes of bone, the Crothar Emperor. He turned slowly, his face hidden in shadows of the echo return. Ilara stepped forward. You destroyed my world, and I will silence your... His voice was not sound, but absence. A hole where noise should be. Lila felt her throat tighten. You took everything from her. The Emperor laughed. A dry sound like breaking glass. She was weak. Her song faded because her people had no fire. You humans burn bright but fast. You will be gone before you learn to sing properly." Nyx growled low and deep. The Emperor turned his head. "Ah, the little dragon. Still alive, how quaint." He raised a hand and the air twisted, Nyx screamed. Not in pain but in rupture, his body tore at the edges. Light leaking out, Alara lunged, but the Emperor flicked his wrist and she crashed against the wall. Lila stood alone. The core pulsed faster, calling to her. "You were made to serve it." The Emperor said, "Come feed it your song and I will let your friends lively." La looked at Alara, bleeding on the floor, at Nyx, struggling to stand. Then she looked at the Kori and smiled. "You think I am afraid of silence." She stepped forward. "But silence is where songs begin." She closed her eyes and sang not the pure tones of the Silthari, not the perfect notes Alara had taught her. She sang like a human, raw, imperfect, full of cracks and hope. The core shuddered. The Emperor staggered. "What is this?" "It's called choice," Lila said between notes. Her voice rose, not loud but true. It carried every memory, every loss, every moment she had ever loved. The core began to crack. No, the Emperor roared. He charged at her. But Nyx leaped in his path, taking the blow meant for Lila. The dragon fell. Lila screamed, her song breaking for a moment. Then she saw Nyx's eyes. They held no fear, only trust. "Finish it." She took a breath and sang again, this time with everything. The core split open, light poured out, not red but white, pure and blinding. The Emperor howled as the light touched him, his form unraveling like smoke in wind. "You are just a girl," he whispered, "and you have never heard a human sing." The core imploded, not with fire but with silence, absolute and total. The chamber collapsed around them. Alara dragged Lila away as the fortress began to fall apart. Nyx did not move. His body glowed, then dissolved into stardust, his essence rising into the silence. They barely made it to the shuttle as they launched. The black hole sealed behind them, swallowing the fortress whole. On the bridge of the Dusk Runner, the crew watched in awe. The Crother fleet fell apart, ship by ship turning to dust without a sound. The war was over, but Lila did not cheers. He sat in the corner, her hands shaking, her eyes empty. Alara knelt beside her. "He is not gone, he is part of the song." "No." Lila looked up. "I felt him leave, but you carry him too." She touched Layla's chest. "Right here." Lila closed her eyes and heard, it not a whisper, but a hum, steady and warm like a heartbeat, like home. The days after the battle were quiet but not empty. Saelthir healed itself as living things do, slowly and with purpose. The scorched earth sprouted new moss. The melted metal from Imperial wreckage was drawn into the soil and reshaped into smooth black stones. The air cleared of smoke and filled again with the soft hum that Dale now recognized as the planet's breath. Dale stayed. He had no ship to return to. The Silver Fin had been claimed by the forest, its hull wrapped in vines, its systems repurposed into something new. A listening post, a guardian node. Lila said it would watch the stars now. Not for trade, but for Threth. Did not mind. For the first time in his life, he felt useful. Not because he was clever or fast-talking, but because he had chosen to care. Lila taught him the old ways, not as a master to a student, but as one who walks beside another. She showed him how to read the wind, how to listen to the trees, how to tell when the rivers were angry or calm. Ember stayed close, often curling around Dale's feet at night, his warm scales a comfort in the cool air. Dale learned to move without noise, to sleep with one ear open, to taste the air for danger. He was not one of the veiled kin, but he was no longer just human. He was something in between. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and golds, Lila found him sitting on a flat stone near the Heartspire. "You have changed," she said. He looked at his hands, calloused, now scarred, from thorns and fire. "I had to." She sat beside him, Ember resting his head on her lap. "The Empire will return," she said. "They always do when they cannot conquer. They study when they cannot destroy. They corrupt." "I know. So what will you do?" He thought for a long time. "I will stay as long as you need me." She studied him, her golden eyes unreadable. "And after I will carry what I learned back out there." He said, not to mock, not to sell, not to hide, but to warn, to tell them that some things are not for taking. Nodded slowly. "That is a heavy burden. Better than the one I carried before." They sat in silence as the stars emerged one by one. Not the cold, distant points of light he once knew, but living eyes watching from the deep. The next morning Lila gave him A gift, a seed, small, smooth, warm to the touch. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Plant it where you go, she said. It will grow only if the soil remembers kindness. He held it carefully, as if it might vanish. What is it? A piece of silthar, a memory in root and leaf. It will not speak, but it will listen, and if danger comes, it will warn you as it warned us of your voice. He smiled faintly. Guess my voice was loud enough. This time she smiled. Too loud enough to wake a world. Weeks passed. Dale helped rebuild. Not structures, but connections. He walked the borders of the valley, learning its moods. He stood watch with the kin. During the long nights when the sky grew restless, he even learned fragments of their song. Though his voice was rough and human and never quite right, Ember began to follow him on patrols, the dragon no longer growling but walking with quiet trust. His tail sometimes brushing Dale's leg like a cat seeking contact. One day Lila told him it was time, not to leave but to choose. You have faced the trial, you have fought the war, you have learned the silence now. You must decide if you return to your kind or remain here forever. He looked at the valley, the trees, the river, the heart spire glowing softly in the distance. He thought of spaceports and credits and lonely drifts between stars. Then he thought of Ember's purr, Lila's song, the way the moss glowed under his feet. I will go back, he said, but not as I was. She understood. The veiled kin prepared a small vessel, not a warship, not a freighter, but a seed ship, grown from the same living metal as the transformed Imperial command vessel. It was sleek, quiet and strong, its hull patterned with veins that pulsed with faint light. On the day of departure, Dale stood before Lila. One last time. Thank you, he said. For what? For not letting me stay a fool. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You chose to learn, that was yours alone. Ember nudged his chest, then pressed something into his palm, a scale. Copper edged with violet, warm and humming. Faintly. Keep it, he will find you if the stars allow. Dale tucked it into his shirt over his heart. He boarded the seed ship alone. As it rose, the forest below shimmered in farewell. The heart spire pulsed once, bright and steady. He did not look back until Silthar was a speck of green and gold in the black. Then he set course for the nearest neutral station. Months later, Dale docked at a dusty outpost on the fringe of known space. The kind of place where credits talked louder than laws. He walked through the crowded bazaar, not with his old swagger, but with quiet steps. His eyes scanning not for profit, but for patterns, for lies, for danger. He found a small berth for his ship, and in the hydroponic bay, he planted the seed. It grew fast. Within days, it was a sapling, its leaves catching the station's artificial light and turning it into something softer. Warmer crew members passing by would pause, sometimes staring at it as if hearing a distant song. Dale never explained it. He opened a small repair shop, fixing comms arrays and navigation systems for freighters and scouts. He charged fair prices and never mocked anyone's accent or origin. Sometimes travelers would come in with stories of strange signals from the rim of space, voices in unknown tongues, ships vanishing without trace. Dale would listen carefully, then say only this: not everything out there wants to talk. Some things just want to be left alone. And if they pressed, he would show them the sapling sea that he would say, that's from a place that does not forgive jokes. Most laughed at first, but when they looked into the leaves and saw their own reflection, not as they were but as they could be, they stopped laughing. One night, as he sat in his cabin, the sapling humming softly in the corner, he felt a warmth in his chest. He pulled out Ember's scale. It glowed faintly, and from somewhere deep in the ship a sound echoed low and familiar. A dragon's purr. He smiled. He was no longer the man who thought it was just a prank. He was the man who learned the lesson, and somewhere far away beneath twin suns and singing trees, a Deathworld girl and her dragon watched the stars and waited, knowing he would carry their silence into the void, and that was enough.